I just think we need to kill them, every one of them, and that's it. And if not that, because the country will not let that happen, the government. Just at least, the least we can do is just kick them out of our land, because this is our home, this is our land, and we deserve it.
Yeah, I think colonialism gets a bad rap. Like, genocide is bad, but colonizing places that are genocidal and they have bad ideology, it's good to come in and correct their views.
Sound like you're advocating for ethnic cleansing?
I don't think so, because Palestinian isn't an ethnicity, it's an ideology, and it's an ideology that says that they want Jews dead, and so we want them as far away from Jews as possible.
As the Israeli military begins its third attempt at ethnic cleansing northern Gaza, Israeli civilians are preparing for their shot at capturing real estate. You would assume that because everything we're about to look at is in violation of international law, that they would be conducting these meetings in secret. They are not meeting in secret, though. In fact, they are openly advertising it, broadcasting it in the media, and doing so with direct support from the Israeli government. Last week, Daniela Weiss hosted this event in Masaf Habazak, just miles from northern Gaza.
Do you feel like this is your political moment?
It's not a moment, it's the beginning of an era.
Weiss is one of the heads of the Nakala Settlement Movement, a West Bank settlement group, comprised of and endorsed by some of the most powerful people in Israel, and this group has turned its colonizing gaze to the settlement of northern Gaza. From a young age, the children of these settler movements are brought up to believe that Gaza is their rightful home, and that there's only one way to reclaim this home, which is by cleansing it of the Palestinian people already living there.
When you have a cut in your body, and that cut, it has an infection. You have to take out the infection. When you take out the infection, then it'll be clean again.
There's a concerted effort in Israeli media to try to portray these settlers as some kind of extremists, ones that adhere to a fringe ideology. However, among Israelis, the idea of settling the Gaza Strip is becoming increasingly popular.
There is some reliable polling that suggests that between 25 and 40% of the population here supports some form of settlement inside Gaza. The awful trauma of October the 7th attacks have pushed those figures towards the upper end.
I love the implication of what he said there, which is that ethnic cleansing is some kind of trauma response, as if their genocidal ideology would be fixed if they just went to therapy. Unsurprisingly, this push to settle Gaza also has a lot of support from within the Israeli government. Itamar Ben-Gvir, Israel's Minister of National Security, is the strongest ally of this new settler movement. To give you an idea of the type of guy Ben-Gvir is, as recently as 2020, he had a portrait of an Israeli mass shooter hanging in his home, Baruch Goldstein, perpetrator of the Ibrahimi Mosque massacre in 1994 in Hebron, where he walked into a mosque and shot and killed 29 Muslims worshipping there. This guy is who is hanging on the Minister of National Security's wall. Also, apparently 10% of Israeli Jews think that Baruch Goldstein is a national hero. There's a fun fact for you, I guess. So what would these future settlements look like? And for that, we can look to the West Bank, where there already exists hundreds of illegal settlements, where they are bulldozing Palestinian homes to replace them with Israeli ones every year. In the past year alone, almost 1,700 Palestinian homes were destroyed to make way for more Israeli settlements. The destruction of these homes, while sometimes done under the auspices of building code violations, is generally done by armed Israeli settlers themselves, often with direct protection provided by the IDF. Armed settlers, with the active participation of army units, repeatedly cut off road access and raid Palestinian communities, detain, assault, and torture residents, and chase them out of their homes and off their lands at gunpoint, or coerce them to leave with death threats, while blocking them from taking their belongings. These attacks aren't new and have been happening long before October 7th. According to Human Rights Watch, settler attacks on Palestinians increased in 2023 to their highest level since the UN began recording this data in 2006. And again, that was before October 7th.
This video shows Israeli settlers attacking Palestinian olive pickers and destroying their property, beating and chasing them from their fields. Ilham shows me where settlers have put straw in her family's trees. They use it to set light to them. Some are hundreds of years old. She says settler attacks have increased since the start of the war.
The level of violence has increased. They have stopped even talking to us now. They just come and beat us. Some open fire, killing people. There is no way they will ever entertain even the thought of a mutual understanding between us.
One of the latest victims of this conflict, not killed in Gaza, but a hillside village in the West Bank. Grief and anger after a 23-year-old Palestinian was shot dead by Jewish settler extremists as they attacked the community of Jit last night.
To make this clear, if you are an Israeli, you can gather your friends, go to the West Bank, and commit whatever atrocities you'd like. Seize homes, shoot at families, burn fields, and you will more than likely have full protection from any repercussions, and in addition, full military support. Settler attacks are rarely even acknowledged, let alone punished. This sort of violence and expansion is viewed as more of a feature than a bug of the Israeli state. The more Palestinians they drive off the land, the more settlements can be built, thus increasing the chances that Israel can expand its borders. It has taken decades of international pressure to even begin to apply generally meaningless sanctions to settlers, like freezing their American bank accounts and barring them from business dealings in the United States. The government itself is taking steps to accelerate this process. Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich recently demanded Israeli sovereignty over the entire region at an Israeli conference for American evangelicals. Israel must free itself from wrong concepts and make an unequivocal Israeli statement to the Arabs and the entire world that a Palestinian state will not be established, through the establishment of new cities and settlements deep in the West Bank and bringing hundreds of thousands of additional settlers to live in them. This sovereignty would allow Israeli control over Gaza for an indefinite and inevitably endless period of time. Just like in the West Bank, settler terror mobs would descend on the Strip in an attempt to strip the last shreds of dignity from the Palestinians living there and clear space in the rubble for more, newer, illegitimate Israeli real estate. This open violation of international law is only possible because each time the Israeli government moves to further legitimize these settlements, the United States, its most powerful ally, makes empty appeals to its concerns while taking no tangible or material steps to actually stop them. None of this would be possible if not for direct support from the United States, with groups like Keep Israel Safe, who fundraise for these settlements and send it to Israel directly.
Nahalal gets support from a number of groups in the U.S., including AFSI, Americans for a Safe Israel, which co-sponsored a recent webinar on the return to Gush Katif.
There's few things I can think of that are less safe than setting up a neighborhood illegally in an active genocide zone. In a way, this could also be understood as settlers acting as human shields for the IDF. The closer and sooner these settlers can move towards any of the fighting, the more of an excuse they have in their minds to ethnically cleanse Palestinians further and further south. This movement is supported by wealthy Americans, but according to Vice, their anonymity must be protected.
There is a very strong support from very prominent, from very, I would say, wealthy people, wealthy Jews.
In the U.S.?
In the U.S.
Can you name any names?
No, I cannot. No.
I would be willing to guess that this protection is less about hiding their support for the Zionist project, and more that they are violating international law by funneling money directly into groups that build these illegal settlements. And again, to get an idea of the types of people we're dealing with here, the funds raised by these groups don't just go to the settler movements, they also go to the IDF and the sniper units specifically. This is probably the most direct way you can send your money there to kill kids, given the IDF snipers' long and storied history of clear, deliberate targeting of civilians. This past year, you saw dozens of doctors all report multiple instances of treating children that had been shot directly in their hearts and skulls. That's the snipers, and that's what these people are funding. Unfortunately, it's looking like these settlers might have their way, as Israel's general's plan for northern Gaza is currently in full effect, despite the US's impotent gestures to withhold military aid if they did it. The safety of the people living in Gaza has reached an all-time low, and it's only going to get worse. The general's plan also ramps up Israel's intentional starvation efforts to an extreme degree. Hundreds of trucks have already been turned away daily by the Israeli blockade. And then days ago, you saw that UNRWA, the largest organization providing that aid, was banned from operating within Israel by the Israeli government. This move has been described by human rights groups as a death sentence for the people still alive in Gaza. 83% of required food aid does not make it into Gaza, which is up from 34% in 2023. This reduction means people in Gaza have gone from having an average of 2 meals a day to just 1 meal every other day. An estimated 50,000 children aged between 6 and 59 months urgently require treatment for malnutrition by the end of the year. It is becoming increasingly likely that Israel will remain unimpeded in its mission to ethnically cleanse the north of the Gaza Strip, and in doing so, clear the way for settler access to Lebensraum and the expansion of its illegal occupation. In 1948, the State of Israel was established after over 700,000 Palestinians were ethnically cleansed from their land and homes, in what's known as the Nakba. These settlers have, for the past year, consistently and publicly called for a new Nakba, and unless the world does something to stop it, they will get what they want.